She typed it drunk. 4 words. She hit send and fell asleep. 43 minutes later, 2 blocks away, a man in a charcoal suit put down his phone and walked. Vanessa Coleman is 30. She translates Korean trafficking depositions for a Manhattan firm. Her neighbor still mistakes her for the cleaning lady. For 7 months, she has been typing confessions into a contact saved as D, broken heart emoji, a number she believed was dead. On the night of her birthday, fresh from the bath, towel turban on her wet hair, champagne satin pajamas, half a glass of red wine in her hand, she sent one last message. I bet you won't come over. She did not know the number had been recycled. 2 a.m. The buzzer rings. She opens the door barefoot. A Korean man fills the frame. Charcoal 3-piece suit. A fine-line serpent climbs the right side of his neck and disappears under his collar. Choi Hyun-suk. They call him the Quiet One. He holds up his phone. Her message glows on the screen. You lost the bet. Behind him, in the corridor shadows, 2 men in plain black suits do not move. She does not slam the door. He asks for 10 minutes. But what she does not know, what nobody in that hallway knows, is that the trafficking deposition locked in her desk drawer carries a name she has been hunting for 3 weeks. And the next morning, when she pulls one more shell company filing, the signatory on the page is going to be standing in her kitchen. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The cursor was blinking inside the contact she had saved as D, broken heart emoji, and Vanessa Coleman was on her 3rd glass of dark red wine. Her thumb hovered. The screen lit the underside of her chin in a thin blue line, and the cream towel wrapped turban style over her still damp hair tilted forward when her head dipped, then snapped back up when she caught herself almost dozing on her own couch. The champagne satin of her pajama shorts caught against the leather. She tucked one bare foot under the other. The gold chain her grandmother had left her swung loose against her collarbone, the clasp turned around to the front, the way it always ended up by the end of a long day. The cupcake on the coffee table had a single grocery store candle, burning down into the frosting. The frosting was the color of cheap roses. The candle had begun to lean. She typed the first sentence and stopped, backspaced it, typed it again. I worked 14 hours today. She watched the message sit there in the bubble, unsent. She had been typing into this contact for 7 months. 7 months of confessions, into a number that did not belong to him anymore, that did not belong to anyone she knew, that she believed in the small superstitious chamber of her chest belonged to the dead. Darius had not been dead, of course. Darius had simply moved to Atlanta with a woman named Tasha and changed his number and forgotten to tell her. But the line her finger had memorized still rang somewhere, and that somewhere had become, in her private theology, the closest thing she had to a grave. Today I am 30, she typed. Then she added, in case the dead needed to be reminded. She did not press send. She never pressed send. That was the rule. The rule had been the thing that kept the practice safe. The wine glass tilted in her hand, and she straightened it. Outside, the buzzer system in the lobby of her building hummed its low electrical hum, the one she only ever heard at night when the heating ducts went quiet. 14 hours of deposition transcripts, Korean trafficking case. 3 girls from Daegu, 16, 17, 19, the youngest still small enough that her wrists looked like a child's in the photographs the prosecutors had paper-clipped to the file. Vanessa had read every word of every interview twice and translated it into English with the kind of care she reserved for things that would be read aloud one day in a courtroom by a man who would not understand what the Korean had sounded like in the girl's mouth. She had told Walter she could stay another hour. She had stayed 4. He had brought her coffee at 7 and at 9, and at 10 he had put his hand briefly on her shoulder, the way an uncle would, and said, "Go home, Vanessa, please." And she had said, "One more page. Walter, just one more." And he had laughed the tired laugh he had and gone home to his wife. When she had finally taken the elevator down at 11, the building was empty except for the night guard. He had said, "Happy birthday, Miss Coleman," and she had been so tired she had not realized for almost a full second that he had read it on her ID badge, because no one in the firm had remembered. Then the cab, then her own building, then the elevator up. Mrs. Halloran from 4B had been by the mailboxes, carrying a small white poodle and a bag of dry cleaning. She had looked at Vanessa, the long camel coat, the caramel tote, the bone tiredness, and she had said, "Oh, good dear. I left the kitchen unlocked. The recycling bin is by the back door if you wouldn't mind. I'll get the cash to you on Saturday like always." Vanessa had stood very still in the lobby. She had said, "Mrs. Halloran, I am not your cleaner. I am your neighbor. We have lived on the same floor for 2.5 years." Mrs. Halloran had said, "Oh dear." And then, recovering, she had said, "Well, you all look so similar in those big coats, dear. Don't take it personally." In the elevator on the way up, Vanessa had counted 4 floors without breathing. That had been an hour ago. Now she was on the couch with the cupcake and the candle and the contact she should have deleted 7 months ago, and the wine had warmed her enough that the small, dignified part of her brain, the part that had kept her on the bench all day, had finally clocked out. "I bet you won't come over," she typed. She looked at the sentence. Then she typed, "You wouldn't have known how to even when we were married," and added, "But I figured I'd ask the ghost, because the ghost at least pretends to listen." She read it back. She laughed once, low, into the wine glass. She had no intention of sending it. The candle on the cupcake had bent so far that the wax was beginning to puddle into the frosting. She blew it out. The smoke climbed in a thin gray line toward the ceiling, and her own face reflected in the dark window above the radiator. The towel turban and the gold chain and the wide, tired eyes looked like a stranger she might have given directions to on a street corner. Her thumb slipped. She knew the second it happened. There is a particular small click a phone makes when a message goes, and she heard it, and she said no out loud, and she sat up so fast that the towel slid down her temple, and she had to catch it. Sent. 2 o'clock in the morning. Delivered to a number that had not been in her hand for 7 months. The little gray bubble turned blue. She stared at it. Then she did what she always did when something she could not take back happened. She poured another half glass of wine. She drank it. She placed the phone face down on the coffee table next to the dead cupcake. She told herself the number was disconnected. It had to be. Who keeps a number for 7 months without writing back? And she pulled the throw blanket up over her knees and put her head against the arm of the couch and closed her eyes for what she promised herself would be 5 minutes. 43 minutes later, 2 blocks south of her building, in the back seat of a matte black sedan idling at the curb of a restaurant that had been closed for 6 hours, a man named Choi Hyun-suk set his phone face down on the leather seat beside him. He had been reading. The phone had vibrated once. He had looked at it the way he looked at anything that interrupted him, which is to say, without expression. He had read the message. He had read it again. He had not laughed. He had not smiled. He had said, in Korean, to the driver, "Walk the car around the block twice and then home." Then he had opened the door himself, before the driver could come around, and he had stepped out onto the wet sidewalk, in the long charcoal overcoat, draped over his shoulders, without his arms in the sleeves. The serpent inked up the right side of his neck. The matte black coil whose head rested just below his ear caught the light from the restaurant's dimmed window for half a second as he turned. He buttoned the middle button of the charcoal graphite 3-piece suit. He did not button the top 2 of the black silk shirt underneath. He did not need to. The cold did not appear to reach him. Min-jae stepped out of the front passenger seat without being told. The scar through his left eyebrow caught the streetlight. He said one word, also in Korean, "Boss." It was a question and a confirmation in the same syllable. Hyun-suk said, 2 blocks. The brick building with the green awning. Wait in the lobby. Do not come up unless I send. Min-jae nodded once. Min-jae had been with him for 11 years and had learned in the first month never to ask which woman, which deal, which appointment. He simply followed at a distance of 6 paces, his black leather gloves on even though it was barely cold enough for them, the earpiece in his left ear silent. They walked. Hyun-suk did not hurry. He never hurried. He had learned a long time ago that a man who hurried in the kind of suit he wore announced himself, and a man who did not announce himself could walk through any door in this city as long as the doorman believed the suit. He moved at exactly the pace of a man going home from a long dinner with people he tolerated. The overcoat swung from his shoulders. The vacheron on his left wrist read 1:58 in the morning when he glanced at it without seeming to glance at it. He had been reading her messages for 7 months. The number had been recycled by the carrier in May. He had not chosen it. He had been handed a new phone by Min-jae the morning after a man named Sung-woo had been found face down in a parking garage in New Jersey, because the old phone had to disappear with the body, and the new phone had begun, on its second day, to receive long, careful messages from a woman who clearly did not know she was writing to a stranger. The first message had been, "I made coffee for 2 today before I remembered." He had read it. He had set the phone down. He had not replied. The second, a week later, "My mother asked when you are coming for Easter, and I told her you were busy, because I do not know how to tell her you are gone." The third, "I dreamed you were on the train, and I tried to call your name, and the train kept moving." By the second month, he had stopped pretending he was not reading them. By the third, he had started saving them. Not screenshotting, which would have left a trace on a cloud somewhere. He had begun, in a small black leather notebook kept inside the inner breast pocket of the charcoal suit, to write down by hand the line of hers that had stayed with him each week, in his own handwriting, in English and then in Korean, as if translating it into the language he thought in would make the woman who had written it more real. He had never replied because he had understood, by the end of the first week, that replying would be a violence. She was writing to a dead man. He was not the dead man. To answer would have been to take the dead man's place, and the dead man, whoever he was, had clearly been someone who had failed her, and Hyun-suk had no appetite for inheriting another man's failure. So he had read, and he had kept reading, and he had begun, over the 7 months, to know things about her he had no business knowing. He knew that she translated for a law firm. He knew that she had a grandmother who had given her a gold chain. He knew that she lit a candle every Friday, and that she was tired in a way that did not seem to have a bottom. He knew that her name was Vanessa, because she had once typed, "This is Vanessa, in case you forgot what the name on the other end of this looks like." He had not forgotten. Tonight, for the first time, she had asked him for something. Not the dead man, him. The wording had been precise. "I bet you won't come over." It was the first sentence she had ever sent into the phone that was, technically, a question, directed at the man holding it. The dead man could not come over. The dead man was either actually dead or actually in another city with another woman. But the man holding the phone could come over, and she had, without knowing it, dared him. He did not enjoy being dared. He had also not enjoyed, in 7 months, the slow accumulation in him of a feeling he did not have a clean Korean word for, and refused to look up in English, the feeling a man gets when he has been carrying a stranger's interior life in his pocket, and has begun to understand that the carrying has changed him more than the stranger. So he walked. The brick building with the green awning was exactly where she had once described it, in a message in October, about how the green of the awning looked black under the streetlights, and how it made her feel, on certain nights, like she was coming home to a funeral parlor. He had remembered the awning. He had never been here. He had never needed to come. He had known the cross street, the cafe on the corner, the dry cleaner whose sign she could see from her window. He had built a small map of her neighborhood in his head, the way another man might have built a map of a target. He looked up. The fourth floor. The second window from the left was the only one with a light on, a soft yellow lamplight, not the white of a television. He had guessed correctly which window was hers 6 months ago, and had never had reason to confirm it. He confirmed it now, without satisfaction. Min-jae stopped at the lobby door. Hyun-suk went in alone. The night doorman was asleep behind the desk with his chin on his fist. Hyun-suk did not wake him. He took the stairs. He did not like elevators in buildings he had not yet been inside. 4 floors. He climbed them at the same unhurried pace. At her door he did not pause to compose himself, because composing himself was something he had stopped doing in his early 20s. He pressed the buzzer once. Inside the apartment, Vanessa sat up so fast that the wineglass tipped against her bare knee and dribbled a small bloom of red into the champagne satin of her pajama shorts. She did not register it. The towel had slipped halfway down her temple in her sleep. She caught it without thinking, pushed it back up. The buzzer rang again, twice. Patient, not insistent, not apologetic either. Her phone, face down on the table, did not light up, because she had not sent another message since the one she did not remember sending. She glanced at the wall clock. 2 in the morning. She told herself it was the wrong apartment. Someone drunk on the 3rd floor, ringing the wrong bell. She got up. The cold of the wood floor under her bare feet shocked her awake the rest of the way. She picked up the wineglass from where it had tipped against her knee, half full still, and carried it with her, because she did not know what else to do with her hands. She went to the door. She did not check the peephole. She would think later, much later, that the not checking had been the truest thing she had done all year, that some part of her, older than her sense of self, had known there was no danger waiting on the other side, only a consequence. She opened the door. He was taller than the doorway, almost. The long charcoal overcoat over the shoulders of the charcoal graphite 3-piece suit. The matte black coil of the serpent climbing the right side of his neck, the head of it resting just below his ear, visible in full because the top 2 buttons of his black silk shirt were undone. The matte black Oxford shoes. The Vacheron on his left wrist catching the hallway light. The steel signet ring on his right pinky. He was holding up his phone. The screen of it faced her. On the screen was a message bubble. Blue. Sent. Inside the bubble were 6 words that she recognized in the slow underwater way a person recognizes their own face in a security camera replay. I bet you won't come over. He let her read it. He let her read it twice. She did not move. The wineglass in her hand, half full of dark red wine, tilted slightly and then steadied because her grip remembered, even when the rest of her did not, how to hold a glass. The towel slipped a half inch. The gold chain her grandmother had given her caught the light from his watch. He lowered the phone. He said, in English, in a voice that was lower than she had imagined a voice could be, and still be heard, "You lost the bet." She opened her mouth. She did not yet know what she was going to say. Behind her, the candle on the cupcake, which she thought she had blown out, sent up its last thin curl of smoke and went still. Somewhere on the floor below a door closed. Somewhere 2 blocks south, a black sedan turned the corner for the 2nd time and began its 3rd loop. His dark almond eyes did not move from her face. He had the patience of a man who had waited 7 months for a sentence and was prepared to wait another 7 for the next one. She did not close the door. She did not step back. She felt the cold of the hallway air on her bare feet and the warmth of the apartment behind her against the back of her neck, and the gold chain her grandmother had given her, resting in the small dip at the base of her throat, and she understood, very calmly, the way a translator understands the meaning of a word before she has chosen the English for it, that she had just opened a door that did not have a corresponding way to be closed. She lifted the wineglass an inch, not in a toast, just to remind her own hand it was there. And the silence between them, which had been 7 months long and had only ever moved in one direction, began, for the first time, to move in 2. He did not step inside. He did not ask. He simply held that position in the doorway as though the threshold itself were a contract he refused to break without her signature. The hallway light behind him was a sick yellow, the kind every old Brooklyn walk-up wore at 2 in the morning, and it caught the edge of his jaw and the matte black coil of the serpent climbing the right side of his neck. The head of the snake rested just under his ear. The body slid beneath the open collar of his black silk shirt and was gone. Vanessa's bare feet were cold against the floorboards. She felt every grain in the wood. She felt the towel turban shift on her wet hair, a single drop sliding behind her ear, down the slope of her neck, and stopping where her grandmother's thin gold chain lay against her collarbone. She watched the drop and not him. Looking at him directly felt, somehow, like an admission she was not yet ready to sign. 10 minutes, he said. His voice was low, Korean accent pressed gently against the English, like a hand laid flat on a closing door. Then I leave. You decide if I come back. She made a sound that was not a word. It was the start of a question that had not finished assembling itself in her mouth. The wine glass in her hand tipped a fraction, and a single bead of dark red ran over her thumb. He looked at the bead. He did not move toward it. Behind him, deeper in the corridor shadow, she registered 2 more shapes. Black suits, earpieces. They were not pretending to be anywhere else. They were professional shadows, and they had been arranged the way a man arranges chess pieces before a game he intends to win quietly. She stepped back. Half a step, enough to let the door open another inch. He read the gesture the way another man might read a contract paragraph, slowly, weighing every comma. I will stand here, he said. I will not enter. Okay, she heard herself say, and the okay surprised her, because it had no plan attached to it. He did not lean. He did not shift his weight. The long charcoal overcoat draped over his shoulders made him look like a piece of furniture from some austere foreign room, and the steel signet ring on his right pinky caught a thin line of hallway light when his hand moved, finally, to slide his phone back inside the inner pocket of his jacket. The Vacheron on his left wrist read 2:04. 7 months ago, he began, and her stomach folded in on itself the way an envelope folds, neatly, with intention. A number was reassigned to me. The carrier had recycled it. I did not know whose it had been. The first message arrived on a Wednesday. It was 4 words. I bet you remember which 4. She did. She remembered them like a verse she had memorized in childhood. Are you still there? She had typed it from a courthouse bathroom in March, her makeup running into the sink, her closing argument on her phone screen behind the keyboard. I almost replied, he said. I did not. I am not in the habit of replying to mistakes. The next morning, another message came, and another. After 2 weeks, I understood that the person writing was not aware. After 3 weeks, I understood that the person writing was speaking to someone she believed was dead. After a month, I understood that to write back would be cruelty. To block the number would also be cruelty. So I did neither. The wine glass in her hand was suddenly an object she did not know how to hold. She set it down on the small console table beside the door, slow, careful, the way a person sets down something that might explode if dropped. The glass clinked against the wood. The sound was enormous. You read them, she said. Her voice did not break. It only dropped, the way a stone drops, straight down, with no extra movement. All of them. All of them. Yes. She thought of the message from the night her dog died. She thought of the one she sent from the firm's parking garage after Walter passed her over for the partner track for the 3rd time. She thought of the message she had typed at her grandmother's grave in November. 12 sentences, the longest of all of them. The one she had sent at 3:17 in the morning, with both her thumbs shaking. She had said things in that message she had never said aloud to a human being. She had told a dead man that she sometimes drove past Darius's mother's house just to confirm the porch light was still the same color. A hot pressure rose behind her eyes. She did not let it pass into her face. She had spent 30 years training her face. She held the towel turban with one hand, as if it were anchoring her head to her body, and she breathed in slowly through her nose. Why are you here? She said. It was not really a question. It was a slab she was setting down between them. Because tonight you asked, he said. For the first time in 7 months, you asked something of the person you believed was on the other side of that number. The other messages were grief. They were prayers. This one was a dare. A request. You wrote, "I bet you won't come over." That sentence had a verb in the second person. It was the first time you were speaking to a living thing, not to a memory. I could not let the only living thing you ever asked something of remain a silence. Her knees registered the floor in a way they had not before. She was aware of the cold rising up through the boards and into the soles of her feet, into her calves, into the place where her satin shorts ended and her thighs began. She felt small and enormous at once. She felt seen in a way that felt closer to surgery than to romance. "What is your name?" she said. She said it because she could not think of anything else to say, and because saying anything else would have unmade her. "Choi Hyun-suk. Choi Hyun-suk," she repeated, careful with each syllable, and something in him registered the care. A muscle moved along his jaw, not a smile, the pre-architecture of one. "In English," he said, "some people call me the Quiet One. It is not a name I chose. It is a name I have not corrected. And the men behind you? Min Jae Park, my lieutenant, and one of his. They will not enter unless I do not walk out. If I walk out in 10 minutes, they walk out with me. You will not see them again unless I am invited." The word invited sat in the air between them, like a single coin spinning on a tabletop. She did not reach for it. She let it spin. "You are a stranger," she said. "I am the opposite of a stranger," he answered, and his voice did not change, did not warm, did not perform. "I am a person who has read 7 months of a woman's interior life without permission. I am closer to you than your closest friend in one specific way, and I am farther from you than the doorman downstairs in every other way. I owe you a correction. I came tonight to make the correction." She nodded. The motion was small. She did not trust larger ones yet. "Did you ever," she began, and her throat closed slightly, and she made it open again by sheer will. "Did you ever almost answer?" "Twice." "When?" "The night about the dog, and the night you wrote from the cemetery." "Why didn't you?" "Because answering would have replaced his silence with mine. You had built a place to put your grief. That place was a number you believed could not write back. If I wrote back, I would have taken the place from you. I do not take places from people." A laugh came out of her, short, wet, half a sob. She lifted the back of her hand to her mouth. The gold chain at her throat caught the hallway light when she moved. "Jesus!" she whispered, more to the floor than to him. "Jesus!" He did not move. He did not soften. He did not extend a hand. He simply waited inside the architecture of what he had said, the way a man waits inside a room he has built and intends to leave unfurnished until invited to bring in chairs. Behind the towel, a second drop of water tracked down her temple. She caught it on her knuckle and did not know what to do with the wetness. She wiped it on her satin sleeve. The fabric darkened a half shade. "You said 10 minutes, she said. He glanced at the watch. 6.5 remain. Why 10? "Because anything more would be a trespass. Anything less would be a discourtesy. 10 is the length of a confession. After 10, I am asking for something. I came tonight to give, not to ask." She studied him then, fully, for the first time. She let her eyes move from the matte black Oxford shoes up the line of the charcoal trousers, the waistcoat buttoned over the black silk shirt, the undone top buttons, the visible edge of the serpent tattoo, the long line of his throat, the sharp jaw, the cheekbones, the dark almond eyes that had been on her face the entire time without once dropping to anywhere they had not been invited. She understood, in the cold way one understands weather, that she had never in her life been looked at like this. Not by Darius, not by Walter, not by anyone. He was not appraising her. He was witnessing her. It frightened her. It did not frighten her in the right direction. "I am drunk," she said. I know. I am in my pajamas. I know. I have a towel on my head. I know. You are still standing there. Yes. The space between her sternum and her spine did something it had not done in 8 months. It opened. Just an inch. Just enough to remember what it felt like to be a room with a door, not a vault with a combination. You said, she swallowed. You said the dare was the first thing I ever asked of you. It was. Then I have to take it back. I did not know I was asking you. You may take it back. I will leave now, and I will not return. The number will be retired. You will not hear from me again. Your address will be forgotten by the men behind me before sunrise. That is a clean offer. I make it once. He said it the way a man reads the terms of a contract aloud to make sure the other party has heard them clearly. There was no manipulation in it. There was no leverage. There was only the offer, set down between them like a key on a counter, hers to take or leave. She thought of her 30th birthday. She thought of the woman in the elevator who had handed her a coat to hang. She thought of the candle on the grocery store cupcake, the wax pooling around the wick, the wish she had not made because she had not believed in wishes since she was 11. She thought of the message she had typed, I bet you won't come over, and the way her thumb had hovered over send for a full 3 seconds before pressing. She thought of the woman she would be tomorrow if she took the clean offer. That woman would put on a navy dress. That woman would go to the firm. That woman would translate 4 more depositions. That woman would come home, pour wine, light another candle, and write to a number that would now ring nowhere. That woman would be safer, by every measurable margin. That woman would also be alone in a way she had never been alone before, because for 7 months she had at least been alone towards something. Don't leave yet, she said. It came out hoarse. Not yet. Finish the 10. He did not move. He did not nod. The tiniest exhale left his nose. It was the only confirmation she got. 3 minutes remain, he said. 3 minutes, she repeated. Use them however you wish. She closed her eyes. She felt the satin against her ribs. She felt the gold chain at her throat. She felt the cold of the floorboards and the hot pressure behind her eyes, and the dampness of the towel, and the sticky place on her thumb where the wine had run. She felt every detail of herself, the way a person feels her own body after a long fever, surprised by its presence. Tell me one thing, she said, eyes still closed, that you would have written back, if you had written back. Just one. The silence stretched. She could hear his breathing now, even, measured, the breathing of a man who had trained his lungs against panic, the way other men trained their fists. The night you wrote from the cemetery, he said finally. You ended the message with a sentence in Korean. You did not translate it. You wrote it because you did not believe anyone would read it. The sentence was, 나도 거기 있고 싶어요. It means, I want to be there too. If I had written back, I would have answered only that sentence. I would have written, 그곳은 아직 당신의 자리가 아닙니다. It means, that place is not yet your seat. I would have written nothing else. The tears she had held since he started speaking finally moved. They did not fall in a respectable, manageable way. They came in a single hot sheet down her face, and she did not lift a hand to stop them, because lifting a hand would have required deciding what to do with the hand afterward, and she had no decisions left in her. He saw. He did not look away. He also did not advance. 1 minute, he said softly. She opened her eyes. She looked at him, fully, the way he had been looking at her. Come back tomorrow, she said. The words left her mouth before her mind had drafted them. Not tonight, tomorrow, after the sun, with light, with my shoes on. Come back then. Something in him eased. It was not relief. It was the small, professional satisfaction of a man whose terms had been accepted clean. What time? 7, in the evening. Address? You have it. I will not assume that. Give it to me again. She did. Apartment number, street. the buzzer code that did not work, the trick with the second lock. He listened the way he had read her messages. He did not write it down. He did not need to. "Tomorrow at 7, he said. "I will bring nothing. I will ask for nothing. If you have changed your mind by then, you will not answer the buzzer, and I will leave." "Okay." He inclined his head, not a bow, the half-degree of acknowledgement that men of his particular world used when words would have been excess. He took one step back into the corridor. The two black suits behind him moved before he did, parting the shadow. He paused. He looked at her one more time. He said, in a voice she would replay in her head for the rest of her life, "Lock the door behind me. Both locks. The second one needs the small trick. Good night, Vanessa." He had said her name. He had not said it before. Hearing it in his mouth was a small detonation under her ribs. She closed the door. She turned the first lock. She used the trick on the second. She pressed her forehead against the wood and stood there for a long time, and her breath fogged the painted surface in a small oval shape, and she did not move until the oval faded. When she finally turned, the apartment behind her had not changed. The candle on the counter had burned down a half-inch. The cupcake was still on its grocery store plastic. The wine glass was still on the console table where she had set it down. The towel was still on her head. Her grandmother's chain was still at her throat. But the silence in the room was different. It had a shape now. It had a name. It had a Vacheron and a serpent, and a voice that pronounced her name the way nobody had ever pronounced it. She walked to the window. She did not draw the curtain back fully. She lifted one corner with 2 fingers. Down on the street, a black sedan was pulling away from the curb. The taillights traced a long red line down the block and turned the corner and were gone. The street lamp on her side of the avenue flickered once, the way that street lamp had flickered every night for 3 years, the way that street lamp would flicker tomorrow. Tomorrow at 7, she thought. The thought arrived simple, whole, almost domestic, as if it had always been waiting for her to invite it in. Tomorrow at 7. She walked to the bathroom. She unwrapped the towel. She looked at herself in the mirror, the wet hair, the smudged remains of her birthday, the gold chain. She lifted a hand to the chain and held it between 2 fingers and did not say anything to the woman in the mirror. The woman in the mirror did not say anything back. They had an agreement now, the 2 of them, an agreement they had not had at midnight. She turned off the bathroom light. She walked to the bedroom. She did not look at her phone. She set it face down on the dresser. She slid under the duvet in the champagne satin set. She closed her eyes. And for the first time in 7 months, she did not draft a message in her head before sleep. She just slept. She slept until 9:47, which was a thing her body had not done in months. She woke not to an alarm, but to the slant of November sun hitting the wood floor in a long, pale rectangle. The towel was on the pillow beside her. Her hair had dried in a wild halo of layered curls. The champagne satin shirt was twisted at her waist. For a full minute she did not move. She listened to the building, a radiator clicking, a pigeon on the sill, a man 2 floors down yelling at a delivery driver in Spanish. And then she remembered. She sat up so fast her vision pinched at the edges. Her hand went to her throat, found her grandmother's chain, found her pulse beneath it, and only then did she swing her feet to the floor. She walked to the front door barefoot the way she had the night before. She bent. She picked up the small white card from the floor where she had left it. She turned it over once. She read it the way a person reads a verdict that has not yet been delivered. She did not call. She did not text. She did not write a draft she would not send. Instead, she went into the kitchen and made coffee. Real coffee, the slow kind, the kind her mother used to brew on Sundays, with the small steel kettle and the paper filter and the 4-minute bloom. She drank it standing at the counter in her champagne pajamas, with the card placed face down beside the sugar bowl. She watched a small bird land on the fire escape rail and tilt its head at her. Something inside her chest had been rearranged in the night. She could not yet tell whether the rearrangement was an improvement or a wound. She only knew that the apartment did not feel the same. The corners were different. The light fell differently on the books. The silence had a new shape, a shape that was no longer hers alone. She showered. She dressed slowly, a midi dress in burned coral, soft against her skin, a thin cardigan over her shoulders. She put on the gold studs. She slid her grandmother's chain back under the dress where it lived against her sternum. She tied her layered curls back from her face with a velvet band and let the side-swept bang fall the way it always did. She did not look at the card again. She did not have to. The number had already moved into a part of her brain where addresses live without being studied. At 11:14, she walked to the courthouse. She had a deposition transcript due Thursday, and a partner's annotated draft on her desk. The trafficking file was a thick brown folder, with red tape around the edges, 4 months of testimony in Korean and English, and she had been the only translator the firm trusted with the whole of it. She sat down. She opened it. She read 3 pages. She read them again. She underlined nothing because her hand could not yet be trusted to choose what mattered. Walter knocked on her glass door at noon with a paper bag from the deli on the corner, pastrami on rye, pickle on the side, 2 black coffees. He set them down without asking and lowered himself into the chair across from her with the small sigh older men give furniture. "You look rested," he said. The wire-rim glasses caught the window light. "That is not a compliment I have paid you in a year. I slept 8 hours. On purpose. By accident." He smiled. The deep laugh lines around his blue-gray eyes folded in their familiar geography. He unwrapped his own sandwich and ate 2 careful bites before he spoke again. "Vanessa, you know I am not your father." "I know. But if I were, I would say this. Whatever the 8 hours was, hold on to it. Whatever brought it, do not interrogate it too soon. The good things in our lives are usually killed not by enemies, they are killed by the questions we ask too early." She looked down at her sandwich. She did not pick it up. "Walter, have you ever done something you could not yet name?" He chewed. He thought. He drank his coffee. The pocket watch on its thin chain rested against his navy waistcoat like a small, loyal animal. 41 years of marriage, he said. All the good parts of it began that way. He left her the pickle and the second coffee. He closed the door softly behind him. She watched him go and felt, for a passing instant, like a girl whose grandfather had patted her hand at a kitchen table. Camille came by at 1 in a long camel coat and the tortoiseshell glasses sliding down her nose. She set a paper cup of matcha on the corner of Vanessa's desk and dropped into the visitor chair with the unbothered weight of a friend who had long ago stopped knocking. "You ate," Camille said, eyeing the half sandwich. "Walter. He is the only senior partner in this city who feeds people. The other ones eat people." Vanessa almost laughed. Camille caught the almost. Her dark eyes narrowed behind the lenses, the gold hoops swinging slightly with the tilt of her head, the long box braids shifting against the camel coat. "You slept," Camille said. "How do you know that?" "Because your jaw is not doing the thing, the clenched thing. I have not seen your jaw at rest since March." Vanessa shrugged. She picked up her coffee and put it down again. Camille watched. Camille had been watching her for 15 years and had not learned to be subtle about it. "Vanessa, don't. I have not asked the question. You are about to." "Vanessa, it was nothing. 8 hours is not nothing. 8 hours is a country. People emigrate to 8 hours. Camille leaned forward. The cherry-red crossbody bag slid into her lap. "I am not going to push. I am going to sit here and drink my matcha and tell you, in the spirit of 15 years, that whatever it was, you are allowed." "I am. You are." They sat. They drank. Camille did not push. After a while she stood, kissed 2 fingers, touched them to the top of the brown trafficking folder the way one touches a relic, and left without saying goodbye. The smell of her perfume, jasmine and something darker, lingered for a full minute after the door clicked. She worked. Slowly. The Korean came easier today, the syntax untying itself before her eyes, and by 4 in the afternoon, she had cleaned 3 depositions and flagged 2 passages for the senior partner's review. She did not check her phone. The card sat in the inner zip pocket of her caramel tote, and she could feel its presence the way one feels a stone in a shoe, not painful, only present. At 4, she stood at the window of her glass office and watched the East River through the thin November haze. A tug pushed a barge upstream. The water was the color of brushed steel. She found that she was thinking, without permission, about the way he had not stepped through the door, the way he had set the card on the counter as though it were a small offering instead of a claim, the way he had said the word permitted on the phone like a man who knew the precise weight of every English noun. She did not know what to do with the thinking, so she translated 4 more pages and let the thinking sit beside her on the desk, like a cat that had let itself in. She walked home at 6. She bought tulips from the Korean grocer on the corner because she wanted something living in the apartment that had not been there before. The grocer, an older woman whose name was on no sign, took her cash with both hands, the way her own grandmother had taken offered things. The old woman looked at her once, sharp, then smiled at whatever she saw, and gave her a second bunch for free. White ones. Vanessa did not ask why. She suspected, walking home with the 2 bunches in the crook of her arm, that the answer had something to do with the way her face was carrying the 8 hours. She arranged them in a glass jar on the counter. She put on a record. She made dinner, real dinner, salmon and rice and something green, and she ate it sitting at the kitchen island with a single small glass of wine, not 3. The card was still in her bag. She had not moved it. At 8:42, her phone lit up on the counter. Unknown number, New York area code. She let it ring twice. She let it ring a 3rd time. She picked it up. "Hello, I am told you ate today." His voice was the same voice, low, Korean accent pressed against the English, carrying a thing she would not for a long time learn to call tenderness. "Who told you that?" "No one. I guessed." She stood very still at the counter, the tulips on her right, the single glass of wine on her left, the card now visible at the lip of her bag because she had taken it out earlier without remembering she had. "You are not supposed to call me," she said. "No. And yet, you did not call. I did not want the silence to mean a thing it does not mean." She closed her eyes. She let the words land. She let them rearrange the furniture in her chest one more time, and she did not fight the rearrangement. "What does it mean?" she asked. "It means you have not yet decided. That is permitted. I am only telling you that the decision is yours, not the absence. The decision." She drew breath. She turned and looked at her own reflection in the dark window glass, a black woman in a burned coral dress with a velvet band in her curls and a gold chain at her throat, holding a phone like it weighed nothing and weighed everything at once. 30 seconds, she said, like you gave me 10 minutes. Take your 30 seconds. She did. She counted them in her head. She watched the tulips. She watched the second hand on the small clock above the stove move through the arc of half a minute. She watched her own hand on the counter and noticed, distantly, that it was not trembling. "Tell me your name again," she said. "The first one, the one your mother used." A pause. The pause was not the pause of a man calculating. It was the pause of a man being asked to set down a thing he had not set down for a long time. "Hyun-suk," he said. She used the 2 syllables, never one alone. "Hyun-suk. Yes, that is what I will call you. Not the other name, not the title. That one. All right. Do not call me tomorrow," she said, "or the day after. I need to work. I need to translate a deposition I should have finished last week. I need to remember that I am a woman with a job. On Thursday after 7, if you wish, you may call again." Thursday after 7. Yes. All right. She hung up before the okay in her own throat could grow legs and walk out of her mouth. She set the phone down. She did not pick the wine back up. She put the salmon plate in the sink. She washed her hands. She went to her desk and opened the brown folder again, and worked until midnight on a transcript whose Korean now seemed, for reasons she could not articulate, less like a foreign country and more like a room with a window. She did not draft a message to D. Aller. She did not even open the conversation thread. She slept. She slept again. The body, having been shown that 8 hours was a thing it was allowed to have, was beginning to remember. Friday she went to court. She translated live for 2 hours, sitting beside a Korean witness whose hands shook every time she said the name of a man Vanessa did not yet know mattered. She steadied the witness with her own steady voice. She rendered the testimony into clean English, every nuance preserved, every euphemism flagged. The opposing counsel watched her with the dry resentment of a man who had hoped she would slip. She did not slip. At the lunch recess, Walter found her in the marble corridor and squeezed her shoulder once, briefly, and said nothing, which was a thing he did only when she had done well past the point of acknowledgement. Saturday she cleaned the apartment, really cleaned it. She moved the couch. She vacuumed under the bed. She found a hairpin from her wedding day under the dresser and held it in her palm for a long time before dropping it into the wastebasket without ceremony. She washed the sheets in the lavender detergent her mother used. She refolded all her sweaters. She stood in the middle of her clean living room at 3 in the afternoon and breathed in and out, and noticed that the apartment, for the first time in 2 years, smelled like a place a person lived, rather than a place a person waited. Thursday came. She worked 12 straight hours and finished the deposition cleaning at 6:51 and walked into the senior partner's office and laid it on his desk and walked out without waiting to be thanked. She bought groceries. She washed her hair. She put on petrol blue and the studs and a thin slick of lip balm, no makeup, and at 7:14 her phone rang. Hi Yeon-suk, Vanessa. It was the first time he had said her name out loud. She had not anticipated the way it would land, but the 2 soft syllables shaped by a Korean mouth, carefully, the way a man might carry a glassful to the rim across a marble floor. I am at the corner, he said. I will not come up. I wanted you to know I was on this corner before I left it, in case the corner mattered. She looked out her window. 8 floors down on the avenue she could see the long black sedan idling at the curb, the rear door open, a figure standing beside it with his back to the building, the long charcoal overcoat draped over his shoulders against the November cold. He did not look up, he did not raise a hand, he simply stood, the way a man stands at a station platform when the train he came for has not yet decided whether to stop. Stay there 9 more minutes, she said. All right? She did not know why 9. She only knew that 10 would have been an echo of the first night, and she did not want echoes. She wanted her own number. She wanted to choose the integer. She watched the clock above her stove. The second hand made its small patient arc. She watched him not move on the corner below. He was as motionless as a man can be while still breathing. At minute 9, she lifted the phone again. Go home, Hyun-suk. All right. Call me Sunday. Sunday. Yes. He got into the sedan. The rear door closed. The car pulled away from the curb and turned at the light and was gone. She stood at the window for another full minute after the taillights had vanished. Then she crossed to her desk. She opened the bottom drawer. She took out the small wooden box her grandmother had given her on her 16th birthday, the one she used for things she did not know what to do with. She placed his white card inside it. She closed the lid. She set the box back in the drawer. She had not handed him a key. She had handed him an integer. 9 minutes, Sunday. A name with 2 soft syllables. It was a small architecture. It would hold weight or it would not. Either way, it was hers. She slept. The body, by now, had stopped being surprised. The 8 hours arrived and were accepted without ceremony, the way good news, after a long time, simply walks in and sits down. A week is a strange unit of measurement, when you are not entirely sure who you are anymore. It is long enough for a habit to begin, short enough for that habit to feel like a secret you are keeping from yourself. Vanessa Coleman spent that week translating, eating standing up over the kitchen counter, and pretending the card on the corner of her desk was not a card at all, but a small black tile that had always lived there, part of the wood. She did not text the number. She did not call it. She refilled the water in the orchid on her windowsill and watered it twice by accident, because she was thinking about the wrong things while she poured. The orchid did not complain. Orchids, in her experience, rarely complained until they were already dying. At the office, she wore the burned coral midi dress, the one her mother had once said made her look like a sunset that had decided to walk into a room. She wore the thin gold chain. She wore her hair in the layered curly bob, the long side-swept bang falling just so over her right brow, hiding the small frown she had developed somewhere between Beat 3 and Tuesday. She drank coffee that was too hot and answered emails that were too long and translated, line by line, the trafficking deposition that had been sitting in her inbox for 6 months and that, until last week, had been the most exhausting thing in her life. It was no longer the most exhausting thing in her life. It was second now, a close second, but second. Walter Brennan stopped by her office on Wednesday afternoon. He carried a paper cup of tea that had gone slightly cold and the houndstooth scarf still around his neck, even though the building was, as it always was, overheated to the point of complaint. He sat down in the chair opposite her desk, the way men of a certain age sit down, with a small exhale that was less about effort and more about ceremony. "You look tired," he said. "I am tired. Tired in the way that is solvable by sleep, or tired in the other way." She smiled at him, because she could not afford not to. Sleep would help. He sipped his tea, watched her over the rim of his wire-rim glasses, and did not press. That was the thing about Walter. He had been her father's friend before he had been hers, and he had inherited her the way some men inherit watches, with a quiet sense of obligation that he had, over 20 years, transmuted into something closer to love. The deposition? Almost done with the first pass. The Korean is technical. They drafted the original in legalese, and then someone, badly, ran it through a machine. I am untangling the machine. Good. Anything jumping out? She hesitated. The hesitation was a quarter of a second, no more. A jury would not have caught it. Walter, who had spent 40 years watching people hesitate before lies, caught it. "Shell companies," she said, "because half a truth is a strategy, a lot of them. Koreatown addresses, mostly. I am building a list. Names of record? Not yet. I want to finish the deposition before I cross-reference. Otherwise, I will start chasing the names and stop reading the Korean." He nodded, slowly. He approved of discipline. He had taught her discipline. "When you have the list, bring it to me first, before the partners' meeting. I want to see what shape we are looking at." "Yes, Walter." He stood, paused at the door, and turned. "Vanessa." "Yes. Whatever the other tired is, the one that is not solved by sleep. I am here for that too. You know that." She did know that. She nodded. He left. She watched the door close and then sat for a long time without moving, her hands flat on either side of the keyboard, palms down, the way a pianist sits before a piece she has not yet decided to play. She did not cross-reference the names that afternoon. She finished translating Section 4. She translated Section 5. She walked home in the cold, with the caramel leather tote on her shoulder and a bag of clementines from the corner market, because the apartment had run out of vitamin C and she had run out of excuses to keep delaying small acts of self-care. She ate 3 clementines standing at the window. She watched the street. She did not look at her phone. She did not look at the card. Thursday, she finished Section 6. Friday morning, she finished Section 7, the last one, the one where the witness, a young Vietnamese woman whose name had been redacted to a single letter, described the apartment in Queens where she had been held for 14 months, the smell of the carpet, the sound of the radiator, the man who came on Wednesdays with the envelopes. Vanessa translated it twice, once for accuracy, once because the first time she had not been able to feel her own hands. When she was done, she closed the file, drank water from the glass on her desk, and opened the firm's internal database. She typed in the first shell company, Sun Lily Holdings LLC, registered Koreatown, Manhattan. The signatory of record appeared in a small gray box at the bottom of the screen. Choi Hyun-suk. Her stomach did the things stomachs do when an elevator drops a floor without warning. She blinked. She read the name again. She read it a third time, slowly, in case the letters had decided to rearrange themselves out of mercy. They had not. She typed in the second shell, Iron Crane Logistics, signatory, Choi Hyun-suk, third, Yongsan Property Group, Choi Hyun-suk, fourth, Choi Hyun-suk, fifth, Choi Hyun-suk, sixth, Choi Hyun-suk. By the eighth name she had stopped reading the company. She was only reading his. It appeared the way a heartbeat appears on a monitor, identical and inevitable, the same 6 syllables her brain had begun, against her better judgment, to set to a small private rhythm. She closed the database. She did not close it gently. The mouse made a small, angry click that the empty office, at 6 on a Friday evening, returned to her with an echo. She stood. She sat. She stood again. She walked to the window of her office, which looked out at the back of another building, brick and air conditioning units, nothing kind. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and tried to think. The quiet stranger who had stood in her doorway and said, "You lost the bet." The man who had read her grief for 7 months and given her, in return, 10 minutes of his voice and a card. The man whose silence had felt, this past week, like the only safe room in a city that had been remodeling itself into a series of doorways she could not enter. That man was, on paper, every shell company her firm was hunting. Every shell company that, by next month, would have his name attached to subpoenas, indictments, headlines. Every shell company whose ownership the Vietnamese witness's letter-name testimony was being used, line by line, in Vanessa's own translation, to crack open. She had handed him her interior life by accident. He had, it appeared, handed her his quiet on purpose, because his quiet had a price tag she had been too tired to read. She walked back to her desk. She sat down. She did not cry. Crying was a thing she did at home with the candle. At work, she did not cry. At work, she did inventory. Inventory 1. The card was still in the corner of her desk, face down, the way she had left it. She picked it up. The matte black was warm from the desk lamp. She held it in her palm and weighed it the way someone weighs an object that has just changed weight without changing mass. Inventory 2. The card had a phone number. That was all it had. No address, no name, no firm, no syndicate. The card itself was deniable. Nothing on her desk, nothing on her phone, nothing in her sent messages would, on a forensic pull, tie her to Choi Hyun-suk. The only thing that tied her to him was the memory of him standing in her doorway at 2 in the morning, and the firm did not have a subpoena for her memory. Not yet. Inventory 3. The internal database query she had just run was logged. Of course it was. Every query was logged. But she had run queries on every signatory of every shell on her list. The Choi searches would sit inside a pile of 43 other names, none of which she had read for longer than 15 seconds. The pattern would only become a pattern if someone went looking for one. Inventory 4. Walter had asked her, that afternoon, to bring him the list before the partners' meeting. The partners' meeting was Tuesday. She had 4 days. She closed her eyes. The cold of the window was still on her forehead, a small ghost of glass that had followed her back to the chair. She breathed in through her nose, out through her mouth, the way the meditation app she had downloaded and never opened had once, in a notification, suggested. She thought, very clearly, 3 things, in order. 1. She was an officer of the court. She had taken an oath. The oath was not a metaphor. 2. The Vietnamese woman, whose name was a single letter, had been held in an apartment in Queens for 14 months, and the man who came on Wednesdays with the envelopes had not been Choi Hyun-suk, but he had been, somewhere upstream, on a payroll that ran through Sun Lily Holdings LLC. 3. She did not, at this moment, know enough to act. She knew enough to panic. The two were not the same. She opened her eyes. She pulled a manila folder from the drawer. She printed the list of shell companies, all 48 of them, with the signatory column attached. She printed it on the office printer the way she had printed every other list in her 7 years at the firm, on the same paper with the same timestamp, indistinguishable from any other document she had ever produced. She put the printout in the manila folder. She did not annotate it. She did not highlight the 11 choix. She did not, anywhere on the page, do anything that, if found, would tell a story. She put the folder in the bottom drawer of her desk, the one with the small brass lock that had come with the desk and that, in 7 years, she had never once used. She locked the drawer. She put the key on her keyring, the small silver one between her apartment key and her mailbox key. She turned off the desk lamp. She put on her caramel coat. She walked out of the office. Frun nodded at the night cleaner in the hallway, a Polish woman named Magda who always called her Miss V because Coleman was too many consonants at the end of a long shift. Magda nodded back. The elevator came. Vanessa rode it down 41 floors in silence, her reflection in the brushed steel, a soft column of coral and gold, and a face that, from a certain angle, looked composed. On the street, the wind was the wind of a city in late autumn, the kind that finds the gap between scarf and collar and reminds you that you are made of skin. She walked the 11 blocks home because the subway, tonight, would have been a small box full of strangers, and she did not, tonight, trust herself inside a small box. She did not look at her phone. She did not look at the card, which was in the inner pocket of her coat now, a small black weight she had not, consciously, decided to bring. She climbed the 4 flights to her apartment. She unlocked the door. She did not turn on the overhead light. She lit the candle on the kitchen counter, the same candle, the wick now shorter than the rim of the glass. She poured a glass of dark red wine, smaller than usual, because she needed to think and not to soften. She sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet, and her bare feet flat on the cold tile, and her coral dress riding up over her knees in a way that, on any other night, she would have corrected. Tonight, she did not correct it. Tonight, she let the cold of the tile through to her skin, because the cold was useful. The cold was an anchor. She thought about the card in her coat pocket. She thought about Walter, who had said he was here for the other tired too. She thought about the Vietnamese woman, the letter name, the radiator. She thought about Choi Hyun-suk standing in her doorway at 2 in the morning, the serpent climbing his neck, the matte phone held up so she could see her own confession in the cold light of its screen. You lost the bet. The voice, low, almost kind. The voice of a man who had read her for 7 months and had never once written back. She thought about whether, on a different night, she would have told him to leave, whether she would have shut the door, whether the woman she had been at 23, before Darius, before the suspension she did not yet know was coming, would have looked at the man in the doorway and said, "No, I am sorry, I do not know you." She knew, with the small, clean certainty that came from sitting on a cold floor with a glass of wine, that the woman at 23 would have. She knew that the woman at 30 had not. She knew that the difference between them was 7 years and the entire architecture of how a person learns to be lonely. She did not text the number. She did not call it. She drank the wine, slowly, in small sips, the way her grandmother had once told her, women drink wine when they are thinking, and not when they are drowning. She felt the thin gold chain at her throat, warm from her skin, the small clasp at the back of her neck, where it had been for 16 years. She made one decision, and only one. She would say nothing, not to Walter, not to Camille, not to the man whose card was in her coat pocket. She would finish translating the deposition. She would deliver the list of shells to Walter on Monday morning, neutral, alphabetical, unannotated. She would let the firm do what the firm did. She would watch, she would learn, she would, when she knew enough to act, decide what acting meant. Until then, she would be the woman who, at 30, had finally learned to wait. She stood up from the floor. Her knees made a small sound. She blew out the candle. She walked, in the dark, to the bedroom, undressed without ceremony, hung the coral dress on the back of the door, and put on the champagne satin pajama set because, against her own better judgment, it had become the only thing she could sleep in. She got into bed. She did not look at her phone. She did not look at the coat hanging by the door, or at the small black weight in its pocket. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep right away. She lay in the dark and listened to the radiator, which knocked twice and then went quiet, and to a siren somewhere on the avenue, which rose and fell and was gone. She thought about the word refuge. She thought about how a word can change shape inside a sentence, the way a man can change shape inside a doorway. She thought about the Korean character for quiet, the way her teacher had once drawn it on a whiteboard, 3 strokes and a held breath. She slept eventually. The sleep was thinner than the night before. The body, it turned out, could still be surprised. The 8 hours did not arrive. 5 did, and then she was awake in the blue hour before dawn, staring at the ceiling, her hand at her throat where the gold chain lay warm against her pulse, the small private rhythm of his name still somewhere underneath it, and the locked drawer at the office very, very far away. She got up before the alarm. The blue hour had become her hour, the small slice of time before the world remembered what it wanted from her. She made coffee in the dark. She drank it standing at the window. The gold chain stayed warm against her collarbone. The locked drawer at the office stayed locked in her head. She wore the petrol blue midi dress, the one with the high collar that hid the pulse at her throat when her pulse decided to misbehave. She put on the caramel tote, the discreet gold studs, the face she had worn to work for 8 years, and walked out into a Tuesday that did not yet know it was going to break her. The day was uneventful in the way that bad days often are before they arrive. She translated. She filed. She avoided Walter Brennan's eye in the hallway, because Walter Brennan had the kind of blue-gray gaze behind the wire-rim glasses that could read a paragraph off your face if you let him. She did not let him. The pocket watch on his chain caught the overhead light and threw a small, bright coin onto the wall. At lunch, she ate a salad at her desk. She did not call Camille. Camille had called her twice that morning, and Vanessa had pressed the side button each time, watched the screen go dark, and gone back to the deposition. There was a quiet anger under that silence, and she did not yet know what to do with it. She left the office at 6. The sky over the city was the color of bruised plums. She rode the train home with her tote on her lap, her chin tilted just enough to keep the gold chain hidden behind the collar. A woman across from her was crying quietly into a tissue. Vanessa looked at her own reflection in the window glass instead. A face that had, somewhere along the line, started looking like a woman who knew things. She got off at her stop. She bought tangerines from the corner market. She walked the 4 blocks home with the bag in one hand and her keys in the other. She did not see Darius at first. He was sitting on the bottom step of her building, hood up, head down, a brown paper bag between his boots. The street lamp above him flickered the way it had been flickering for 3 years. She knew the shoulders before she knew the face. The body recognizes the body it once shared a bed with, even after the mind has filed the divorce papers. She stopped on the sidewalk. The bag of tangerines pulled gently at her wrist. "V," he said. His voice was thicker than she remembered. Wetter, slower. He lifted his head. The neatly trimmed black beard was not neatly trimmed anymore. The deep brown eyes were not charismatic anymore. The smile he tried to put on was the smile of a man who had been rehearsing it on the train and had still not gotten it right. "Darius." Her voice came out flat. It surprised her, that flatness. 8 months of small surrenders, and here, finally, was the part of her that did not bend. "You gonna let me in?" "No." He stood up. The brown paper bag tipped sideways and clinked against the step. He did not pick it up. The navy button-down, the open black leather jacket, the indigo jeans, the brown Chelsea boots, the silver wristwatch, the thin silver chain under the collar. Every detail of the man she had loved at 24, arranged on the body of the man who had left at 29. The costume was the same. The man inside it was a different temperature now. I just want to talk to you, V. Then talk. Out here? Out here. He laughed. It was a small, wet, ugly laugh. Camille said it was bad. I didn't believe her. Now I'm looking at you, and I believe her. She did not move. She kept the bag of tangerines at her side. She kept the keys in her hand, the longest key threaded between her index and middle fingers, in a way her grandmother had taught her when she was 17, and which she had not had to think about for years. Camille said what? Camille said you got a Korean man coming around. Camille said 2 in the morning. Camille said you opened the door in your pajamas. He took a step toward her. He smelled the way men smell when they have been drinking since noon and have stopped noticing. Camille said his name, and I knew the name, V. Everybody in this city who reads a paper knows that name. What are you doing? She heard, very far away, the part of herself that wanted to explain. She did not let it speak. She had explained enough things to this man in her life. The explaining had not, in the end, been what kept him. Get off my step, Darius. I'm trying to help you. Get off my step, V. He reached for her wrist. There is a particular failure that lives in a body it once trusted. His fingers closed around the bone of her wrist exactly where his fingers had closed around it the night he proposed, in a hotel bar in Brooklyn, when he had pulled her hand toward him across the small round table and said please. The cells under her skin remembered the gesture before her mind did. Her breath stopped, her keys did not move. The bag of tangerines swung once, a small, dull pendulum at the end of her other arm. You are hurting me, she said. The flatness was still there. The flatness was the only thing keeping her upright. He did not let go. You are going to listen to me, he said, and his other hand came up, palm open, in the small high arc of a man who had not yet decided what he was going to do with that hand, but had already decided it was his to lift. The buzzer of her building rang. It rang from the inside, not from the street, from the inside. Darius went still, so did she. The hand at the end of his arm hung in the air like a thing he had forgotten he was holding. Behind the glass door of the lobby, a figure had moved into the small square of light by the intercom panel. The figure pressed a button. The buzzer rang again, long, steady, deliberate. The door of the building opened from the inside. Min Jae Park stepped onto the top of the stoop. Slim black two-piece suit, white dress shirt, black leather gloves on both hands. The pale scar through his left eyebrow caught the flicker of the street lamp. The flatline mouth did not change. The black earpiece in his left ear caught a small wink of light. The jacket was buttoned. The shoulder holster was not, at this moment, visible, which was almost worse, because it meant he had not decided yet whether to show it. Miss Coleman, he said. His English was clean, careful, the kind of English a man learns by listening. Is this gentleman a friend? She did not look at Darius. She looked at Min Jae. No. Then he is going to leave. Darius's hand fell. The grip on her wrist did not. He turned his head, slowly, toward the man on the step, and a small, bad calculation moved behind his deep brown eyes. She watched him do the math. The math was not difficult. The math was a Korean man in a clean suit, standing at the top of her stoop, at 7:30 in the evening, as if he had been standing there all his life. Who the hell are you? Darius said. I am the person who is asking you to leave. You don't tell me what to do in front of my wife. Ex-wife, Vanessa said. The flatness in her voice now had a small bright edge. Min Jae walked down the 3 steps of the stoop. He did not hurry. He did not slow. He stopped 1 arm's length from Darius and looked, not at Darius's face, but at the hand that was still wrapped around her wrist. Then he looked, with the same blank attentiveness, at Darius's face. "Sir," he said, "let go of the lady's wrist." Darius let go of the lady's wrist. He did it in the way men let go of things when they have been told to, by someone they have just realized they cannot afford to fight. He did it badly. He shook her wrist off, a small last assertion of ownership, and stepped back. The bag of tangerines swung against her thigh. "Walk down the block," Min-jae said. "Turn the corner. There is a black car. The driver will take you home. He will not speak to you. You will not speak to him. Tomorrow morning, when you are sober, you will think about this evening, and you will not come back to this building. Do you understand?" "Who the? Do you understand?" Something in the calm of the second asking opened a small cold door in Darius's chest. She watched it open from her place on the sidewalk. She watched his shoulders fall by 1/4 of an inch. She watched the leather jacket settle. She watched the man she had once promised the rest of her life to nod, once, at a stranger in a black suit on a Tuesday in October, and walk away down her block without looking back. The brown paper bag stayed where he had left it, leaning against the bottom step, a small abandoned witness. Min-jae waited until Darius had turned the corner. Then he turned to her. The flatline mouth did not soften. The black gloves did not move. He inclined his head, the smallest fraction, the way he might have inclined it to a judge. "He installed a feature on your phone," he said. "The first night, a panic action. You did not trigger it tonight. The accelerometer did. Your pulse moved very fast for 30 seconds. The phone called us. We were 9 minutes away." She opened her mouth. She closed it. The bag of tangerines was very heavy at the end of her arm. "You are unharmed," he said. It was not a question. He had already looked. "I will walk you to your door." "No." He waited. "Thank you," she said. The thank you came out cracked and small and surprised her. "I want to walk by myself." He inclined his head again. He stepped aside. She climbed her own stoop with the bag of tangerines in one hand and her keys in the other, and the cells of her right wrist still remembering the shape of a hand she had once kissed. She did not look back. At the top of the stoop, she put her key in the lock. The lock turned. She went inside. The door closed behind her with the small final click that doors make in buildings older than the people who live in them. In the lobby, she leaned her forehead against the cool inside of the door and breathed once. In, out. The bag of tangerines slid to the floor. One rolled out and stopped against the baseboard. She did not cry. She realized with a small flat astonishment, too tired to cry. She slept that night without dreaming. The phone did not ring. The buzzer did not ring. Somewhere, in a black sedan that did not park itself within sight of her window, a man in a charcoal graphite suit sat with his hands folded on his knees, read the report Min-jae had quietly sent, and said nothing to the driver. She woke at 6. She showered. She put on the raspberry pink midi dress, because the burned coral one no longer felt like armor, and the petrol blue one had been in the room with Darius's hand on her wrist. She put on the gold chain. She put on the gold studs. She drank a glass of water. She did not eat breakfast. She walked to the train. She knew something was wrong the moment she stepped off the elevator on the 11th floor. The receptionist did not look up. The receptionist always looked up. The receptionist looked at the keyboard as if the keyboard had insulted her mother. Walter Brennan was waiting for her in the small glass conference room at the end of the corridor. He stood when she came in. He did not smile. The blue-gray eyes behind the wire-rim glasses were not unkind. They were tired in a way she had never seen them tired before. The pocket watch was tucked into its pocket. The houndstooth scarf was folded over the back of his chair, even though it was warm in the room. "Sit down, Vanessa." She sat. "Compliance opened a file on you this morning." She did not say anything. The raspberry pink of the dress in the glass of the conference room wall looked almost obscenely bright. A name came across the firm's conflict screen last night. The screen flagged you. 3 witnesses at a courthouse coffee shop heard a junior partner, who shall remain nameless and who I will personally eviscerate, refer to you in connection with that name. By 8 this morning, 2 senior partners had requested a review. The executive committee met at 8:30. They have asked me, as your supervising partner, to inform you that you are suspended with pay, effective immediately, pending the conclusion of an internal review for potential association with a person of interest in a matter on which you are the lead translator. Do you understand what I am saying to you? She understood. The understanding arrived dry and clean, and at exactly the speed at which her body was capable of receiving it. Yes, you will need to surrender your access card, your firm laptop, your office phone. Security will accompany you to your desk to collect your personal effects. You may not, under any circumstances, contact anyone at the firm, any client, or any witness in the matter until the review concludes. I am very, very sorry, Vanessa. She nodded. She stood. The raspberry pink dress, in that moment, felt like a flag of the wrong country. The walk to her desk was the longest walk of her life. Heads did not turn. Heads did precisely the opposite of turning, which was a kind of turning all its own. The security guard at her elbow was a man named Eddie who had bought her coffee once when she stayed past midnight on a Saturday. Eddie looked at the floor. At her desk she packed quickly the picture of her grandmother, the orchid, the small ceramic mug, the card, which she slid into her tote with hands that did not know they were shaking. She bent to pull the bottom drawer of her desk open, and the thin gold chain at her throat caught on the corner of the drawer pull and snapped, cleanly, a small bright sound under the office hum, and the chain slid down the front of her dress and down behind the desk and was gone. She froze. She put her hand to her throat. The skin where the chain had been was warm and empty. Eddie, she said. Her voice was not flat anymore. Her voice was a thread. Eddie looked at her then, for the first time. My grandmother's chain. It fell behind the desk. Eddie looked at the desk. Eddie looked at the corridor behind him, where, very far away at the end of it, 2 figures in dark suits had appeared with a clipboard. Eddie looked at her. I am sorry, Miss Coleman, he said. I cannot let you move the desk. They will retrieve any personal items in the sweep and forward them to you within 30 days. 30 days. She stood up. She picked up the cardboard box with the orchid and the mug and the picture of her grandmother and the card. She walked to the elevator with Eddie at her elbow. She rode the elevator down 46 floors in silence. She walked out through the lobby past the security desk, where, 8 years earlier, she had walked in on her first day with a paper bag from a bakery and a heart so full of the future she had thought she might float. She walked out the revolving door into the October street. She had left her coat behind on her office chair. She did not go back for it. She walked home in the cold of a clear afternoon, in the raspberry pink dress, the cardboard box pressed against her chest, the wind pulling at her layered curly bob, and the skin of her bare collarbone where her grandmother's gold chain was not, anymore. A woman with a stroller asked if she was all right. She nodded. She kept walking. 8 blocks from the firm, she stopped at a corner. She put the box down on a low concrete planter. She took out her phone. She opened her messages. Her thumb hovered over the contact that, for 8 months and 1 strange autumn, had been the place she went when she could not go anywhere else. There was no number to text. She did not press. She picked up the box. She walked the rest of the way home, with the wind cutting through the raspberry pink dress and the small empty skin at her throat, going colder by the block. When she got to her building, she did not look at the bottom step where the brown paper bag had been the night before. Someone had cleared it. The sidewalk in front of her stoop was clean. She climbed the steps. She put her key in the lock. The lock turned. She went inside. She set the cardboard box down on the floor of her living room next to the kitchen counter and stood there for a long minute looking at it, at the orchid leaning slightly out of the box, at the picture of her grandmother, at the small bone-white ceramic mug, at the card with the wordless black line. She did not sit down. She did not lie down. She did not pour wine. She walked to the window. She put her forehead against the cold glass. Outside, the city was beginning to turn on its lights, one square at a time, in the careful, patient way that cities have. As if every lit window were a small private decision someone had made not to give up just yet. She watched the windows come on. She watched her own reflection in the glass, faint, doubled. A woman in a raspberry pink dress, with no chain at her throat, and no number on her phone, and no desk to go back to in the morning. The cold glass left a small pale print on her forehead when she pulled away. She did not move from the window. She stood there until the streetlights came up and the bruised plum sky had finally finished going black. And somewhere across the city, a man in a charcoal graffiti suit was being handed a folded slip of paper by a lieutenant in black leather gloves, and was reading 3 sentences on it, and was setting it down on a desk of dark wood, and was saying, very quietly, in a voice that the lieutenant had heard only twice in 9 years, the word that meant tonight. The word that meant tonight crossed the city without a sound. It crossed in the hum of a black sedan that did not break the speed limit, in the click of a leather glove tightening on a steering wheel, in the soft give of a charcoal overcoat being lifted from the back of a chair and draped across 2 wide shoulders. Vanessa Coleman did not hear it cross. She only felt the apartment grow quieter around her, the way a room goes quiet just before a door is knocked on. She was still at the window when the buzzer rang. The streetlights had turned the bruised plum sky into a flat slab of black. Her forehead still carried the small, pale ghost of cold glass. The buzzer sounded once, low, polite, not the hammer her ex-husband had made of it. She walked to the panel barefoot and pressed the button without asking who it was. She already knew. She unlocked the door and stepped back into the room. She did not stand close to it. She let the hallway do its own work. The elevator pinged at the end of the corridor. Footsteps, 2 sets, then 1. The other set stopped at the corner, the way the other set always stopped at the corner. Then the single set kept coming, even, unhurried, the sound of a man who had never in his life had to rush. Choi Hyun-suk appeared in the open doorway with a flat leather case in his left hand. He did not cross the threshold. He stood exactly where he had stood the first night, at the seam between the corridor and her life, waiting to be invited or refused. The charcoal graphite 3-piece sat on him the way it always did, hand-stitched lapels, top 2 buttons of the black silk shirt undone, the matte black fine-line serpent on the right side of his neck catching the hall light and giving nothing back. The long charcoal overcoat was draped over his shoulders. The vacheron on his left wrist showed 11 minutes past 9. She looked at his hands, she looked at the case, she looked at his face. She did not speak. "May I come in?" he said. She nodded once. He stepped across the threshold. He closed the door behind him with the same care a man uses to close a door on a sleeping child. He walked to her kitchen counter, set the leather case down flat, and did not open it yet. He turned and looked at her. She was still in the raspberry pink midi dress she had walked home in. Her grandmother's thin gold chain was not at her throat. There were faint salt tracks down the sides of her face that she had not bothered to wipe away. "You were suspended today," he said. It was not a question. "You know I was. Min told me at 6. I waited 3 hours before I came." His eyes did not leave hers. "I needed the 3 hours to be sure I was bringing the right thing." She crossed her arms. She felt the bones of them. "What did you bring?" He turned to the counter. He flipped the brass latches of the leather case. They clicked once, twice. He opened the lid. Inside were 2 stacks. The left stack was paper, banded, thick as a Bible. The right stack was thinner, a manila folder tied with a black ribbon. On top of the manila folder, resting in the dead center of it, like an offering laid on an altar, was a thin gold chain with a small worn clasp. Her grandmother's chain, the one that had fallen behind her desk that morning while 2 security guards stood at her elbows. She made a sound that was not quite a word. Her hand went up to her own throat on instinct. found the bare skin there, and dropped. Min went back for it, he said. After the building emptied, the cleaning staff had swept it into a small plastic bag and left it on the supervisor's desk. He brought it to me at 8. She did not trust her voice yet. She reached out. She did not put it on. She just held it in her hand, the chain warming against her palm, the small old clasp pressing into her lifeline. She closed her fist around it. She nodded at him to keep going. He laid one finger on the thicker paper stack. The shell company in the Koreatown filing your firm pulled. Yonghwa Holdings. The signatory is me. He paused. I want you to understand the order of the sentences I am about to say, because the order is the only thing that matters. Say them. Yonghwa Holdings was registered 9 years ago by my older brother, Choi Yonghwa. He was 28. He set it up as a laundering vehicle for the network your firm is investigating. He did not know what it was when he started. By the time he understood, he was inside it. Hyunsuk's voice did not change pitch. It only got more careful, the way a man's voice gets careful around glass. They killed him in the back of a karaoke room in Busan, 11 months after he signed the founding documents. 2 men with a length of piano wire. I was 26. I was finishing a master's in international finance at Yonsei. I flew home the next morning. She did not move. I have spent the 9 years since taking that network apart from the inside. Every shell company my brother touched, I bought, refiled, and registered in my own name. Every signature on every document your firm has been pulling for the last 2 years is mine, on purpose. I made certain the legal noose would always close around my own neck and no one else's. The men who killed my brother are inside one of those shells. The men who paid them are inside another. The men who paid those men are in the third. He tapped the thick stack. This is everything. Bank records, wire chains, couriers. 3 names at the top who have never been named in any indictment in any country. Subpoena grade. Witnessed. Notarized in 2 jurisdictions. He stopped. He waited. He let her look at the stack the way a man lets a woman look at a wound he has been carrying for 9 years. Why, she said. Why what? Why bring it to me? Why tonight? Why not a prosecutor in Seoul? Why not the FBI? Why not your own lawyer? He was quiet for a long beat. The serpent on his neck did not move. The watch on his wrist did not move. Outside, a delivery truck downshifted on Lexington, and the window pane gave a small, soft rattle. Because you are the only person in 9 years who asked me for something, he said, by accident, at 2 in the morning, in satin pajamas and a wine glass, without knowing who I was. You handed me a sentence that was meant for a dead man, and I read it sober in the back of a car, and I did not write back for 43 minutes, because I was trying to decide whether to let you keep the version of me you had invented. He paused again. I decided to come anyway, and every night since, I have been deciding to keep coming. Tonight your firm took your name off a door because of mine. Tonight is the night I owe you the choice you would have had if you had known who I was the night you typed it. He stepped back from the counter. He put his hands in the pockets of the long charcoal coat. He looked at her, and for the first time since the first night, she watched him become a man instead of a silhouette. The thicker stack goes to your firm and the indictment goes through, he said. 3 names fall, the network collapses inside a year. My name appears on the cover sheet of every shell. Your firm takes the win. The federal prosecutors take the press conference. I take whatever comes after. Or, his voice did not change. The thicker stack goes into the incinerator in the basement of my building tonight, and you and I never speak again, and you call your senior partner in the morning and tell him you have new information about Yonghwa Holdings that exonerates you of association, and the file disappears into a year of motions, and the network rebuilds, and you get your desk back. He nodded once at the gold chain still curled in her fist. Either way, that goes back around your neck. The chain is not part of the choice. She looked down at her closed hand. She opened it. The chain lay coiled in her palm like a small bright snake of its own. She lifted it and, very slowly, fastened it behind her neck. The familiar, small, cold weight settled into the hollow of her throat, the way it had since she was 9 years old, standing in her grandmother's kitchen in Baltimore. She looked up at him. Her face had gone very still. The salt tracks were drying. Her shoulders had come down 1/4 of an inch. "You are asking me to choose between the man who came at 2 in the morning and the woman I would have been if he hadn't," she said. The sentence surprised her on the way out. She heard it land in the room. He heard it too. Something in his eyes moved that she had not seen move before, not even in the doorway the first night. He did not speak. She walked past him to the counter. She put one hand flat on the thicker stack. She felt the weight of 9 years of a man's life under her palm. She felt the weight of 3 names she had been chasing across pulled filings in fluorescent light for 2 years. She felt the weight of her grandmother's chain at her throat. She felt the weight of the morning, the 2 security guards, the cardboard box, the cold walk home in a raspberry pink dress without a coat. "You said I decide what to do with both of us," she said. "I did. Then the file goes to Walter tomorrow morning at 7, before the firm opens, before the review committee meets. I want him to see it from my hand, not from a courier, not from a prosecutor. He raised me in that firm. He gets the first look." She did not lift her hand from the stack. "Your name is on every cover sheet. I will not redact one letter of it. If the federal team asks where the file came from, I will say it came from a confidential source who came forward of his own will and is prepared to be deposed if necessary." She finally looked up. "Are you prepared to be deposed if necessary?" "Yes." "Are you prepared for whatever comes after?" "Yes." "Do you understand that I am not asking you to leave my apartment tonight, and I am not asking you to stay?" He looked at her for a long second. The serpent on his neck did not move. The watch on his wrist did not move. The leather case did not move. He inclined his head, just barely, the way a man inclines his head when a sentence has landed exactly where it needed to land. "I understand," he said. She nodded. She lifted her hand off the stack. She closed the leather case. She clicked one brass latch, then the other. She slid the case across the counter toward him. "You carry it out of this building tonight," she said. "You bring it back to me at 6:50 tomorrow morning, on this counter, sealed. I do not want it in my apartment overnight. I want one night of not being the woman who slept in the same room as the file." Her voice did not shake. "Tomorrow at 6:50, I am the lawyer who delivers it. Tonight, I am whatever I am." He picked up the case. He did not argue. He did not negotiate the hour. He walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the latch. "Vanessa," he said. It was the first time he had used her first name. The shape of it in his mouth was careful, almost surgical, as if he had been holding it in reserve for 9 months and wanted to set it down without breaking. "Yes. Whatever you are tonight," he said, "I am the man standing in the corridor at 6:50. He opened the door and stepped through. He closed it behind him with the same care he had used to close it on the way in. She heard the single set of footsteps reach the corner. She heard the second set fall in behind them. She heard the elevator ping. She heard the doors close. She stood in the kitchen for a long time. She did not cry. She did not move. She put one hand up to her throat and felt the small, cold weight of the chain. She walked to the bedroom. She took the raspberry pink dress off and laid it over the back of a chair. She showered for a long time. She put on the champagne satin pajama set, the same one from the first night, button-up shirt and matching shorts. She wrapped a thick cream towel turban style over her wet hair. She poured a glass of dark red wine, half full, and walked it back to the window where the bruised plum sky had finished going black 2 hours ago. She did not text anyone. She did not have a number to text. She drank the wine slowly and watched the streetlights and counted the hours backward from 6:50. She slept on the couch with her phone, face down on the coffee table, and the apartment door deadbolted twice. She slept without dreaming. At 6:48 in the morning, her buzzer rang once, low, polite. She walked to the panel barefoot. She pressed the button without asking who it was. She already knew. The single set of footsteps came down the corridor. The second set stopped at the corner. He set the sealed leather case on the kitchen counter at 6:50 exactly, the brass latches still locked, the black ribbon on the manila folder inside untouched. He did not sit. He did not take off his coat. He looked at her once. She was already dressed in the navy three-piece suit she kept ironed in the back of her closet for the days the firm asked her to argue in front of a federal judge. The thin gold chain was at her throat. Her face had the calm in it that her grandmother had called the Coleman calm, the one that arrived only on the mornings that mattered. "At 7, she said. "At 7, he said. She picked up the case. She walked past him to the door. He held it open for her. In the corridor, the second set of footsteps fell in beside her for the length of the hallway and stopped at the elevator. She rode down alone with the leather case across her thighs. She walked the 8 blocks to the firm in the cold gray morning with the case held under her left arm and her grandmother's chain warm at her throat. She did not stop for coffee. She did not stop for the small bodega where she always stopped for coffee. She climbed the stone steps of the building she had been escorted out of 23 hours earlier. The doorman blinked at her. She nodded at him. She rode the elevator to the 14th floor. She walked past her sealed office. She walked to the corner office at the end of the hall. Walter Brennan was already at his desk. Silver hair combed sideways, silver beard neatly trimmed, wire-rim glasses pushed up. The houndstooth scarf hung over the back of his chair. He looked up when she filled the doorway, and his blue-gray eyes did something behind the glasses that she had only seen once before, the morning her father had died. "Vanessa." "Walter." She walked in. She closed the door. She set the leather case on the edge of his desk. She clicked the latches open. She turned the case so the contents faced him. She put one hand flat on the thicker stack. "Before you say anything," she said, "before you ask me one question, I need you to read the first 6 pages. Then I will answer everything." He looked at her face. He looked at the stack. He pulled the first 6 pages toward him. He started to read. She stood at the window of his office and watched the cold gray morning come up over the city. And somewhere across town, a man in a charcoal graphite suit was sitting in a high-backed chair in front of a second leather case, this one empty, the brass latches still open, the long charcoal coat folded carefully over the arm of the chair, waiting for whatever came next.
If the story stayed with you even after the screen went dark, know this, it doesn't end here. Our private community is the extension of this channel. Every story ad-free. No interruptions. No breaks in the atmosphere. Bonus scenes and extra chapters the public version doesn't show. And for the inner circle, one of our 3 tiers, one brand new exclusive full-length story every month. Plus the sensual chapters reserved only for the chair you're sitting in. 3 doors in. Scan the QR code on your screen. Tap the link in the pinned comment, or follow the link in the description below. Your name belongs on the next page.
If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever typed a message to someone you swore was gone, just to feel less alone in the room? If a stranger had read every word for 7 months without writing back, would you call that surveillance? Or would you call it the first time someone truly listened? And the night your grandmother's chain slipped from your neck, did you go back for it? Or did you finally let someone else hand it back to you? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about silence, dignity, and quiet justice, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.